If this story had a title, it would probably be Letters. When in 1946, think back if you can, I was 4.5 years old. I was, what I remember about myself physically then was that I always had Band-Aids on my knee because I was kind of a little tom girl, you know, and I skinny little legs and lots of bandages on my knees. And from looking at old pictures that my mother kept in a scrapbook, I had curly blonde hair, and of course I was a lot shorter then. I was really short. I was in first grade, and I remember things about first grade. For some reason, one thing that I remember is, and think it was during the war times, near the end of the war, but it was still, that was very much a big deal. Second World War. I remember in that, I can see the room, and we had windows that had ledges. At that time, it came up about here on me. But they went under these windows, and on those windows were these open boxes that the Red Cross had provided. I don't know if any of you remember these or not. But they were about the size of a cigar box, if you know what a cigar box is. They were about this long and about this deep, and the lid opened up like this against the windows. And every little kid in that room had one of those boxes. What we were supposed to do was fill them with items that would fit, you know, it can be anything really big. You were allowed to put one toy, small toy in there. And then we would bring to school things like a pencil, some paper, little pad, you know, those little pads of paper like that, toothbrush, little toothpaste, soap, I remember putting in there. That's the main things I remember putting in there. We left the boxes at school, and then we would bring things from home. And when they were full, we closed up the boxes, and on a special day, the Red Cross came and took them and sent them overseas to Europe, to refugee camps. So it's supposed to be things that refugees could use, okay, plus one toy. Well, one rule for those boxes was you do not put your name in there. No information about yourself, just no name at all. Well, I have no idea how the rest of this story started when we weren't supposed to put her name in there. But I'm going to blame my mother, because I don't think I would break that rule. She was kind of I always thought she was very conservative, but she was kind of a renegade, looking back. She didn't always obey all the rules. Because it wasn't too long, the boxes had gone, maybe a month or two, and we got the first letter. It was from somebody, it was from Poland, and it was addressed to Kathleen E. Fariday, 408 Damon Street, Council Bluffs, Iowa, where we lived then when I was in first grade. And Mom opened that letter and read it to me. I can remember her reading it. And the letter was from a 7-year-old boy that was in a refugee camp. And he wrote pretty broken English, but you could understand what he said. And basically what he was saying, his name was Freddie, F-R-E-D-Y, is how he signed his name. And he said that he received a box from a young lady, but he was a big boy. He was 7 years old, he told us. And he was so happy to get that box because they were so poor in this refugee camp. And he talked about how both his parents had been killed, and he was very poor and didn't have a lot of money to eat. And he was just so thankful that we sent something. And he said, I hope you are not insulted that I write to you, little miss. Because apparently my mother, she must have done this, because he knew that I was a little girl. So my mother, of course, said, oh, we got to send this guy more things. And so this correspondence developed. I wanted to send him a box of toys. I remember that. I don't remember the exact letter, but I remember that was my first reaction. I was ready to donate all those toys. But she, oh no, she said, we better send some clothing and things that a 7-year-old boy can wear. So I have no idea, after she packed the box, how it ended up at the right refugee camp to the right person. Unless he had given us an address or something, but I don't know. But anyway, this correspondence went on for a while. He'd always write back and thank us, and very politely, and he was so happy to have an American family to correspond with. And then we found, through one of his letters, he introduced his old uncle. He told us about his old uncle, who was the only relative he had left, who was very frail and very poor, but Freddie was taking care of him, and his uncle was the adult that took care of him. And then the letters would go on to say, if there's anything you can send, we are most thankful. So my mother kept sending, she'd send a box, she sent shoes, she'd gather clothes from the neighborhood and the church and everything. And every time we get one of those letters, a box would go back containing a letter from us. And I think this went on for about a year. I can't tell you how many letters went back and forth in boxes with all this clothing, and she even sent him Old Reader's Digest so he could help him do his English. And then we didn't hear from him for a while, and then we got the last letter. And I've got a copy of it here that I'll read to you. It said, Dear lady, I am so bad a person to tell you lies. You are loyal friends to send me gifts and letters and share our thoughts. I am sad and feeling bad that I make up an uncle to get more from my friends, trusting. Please forgive. I cannot forgive myself, and thankful to you for all. And that was the last letter my family ever got, even though we mailed, you know, tried to keep corresponding with him. That was it.
This story is called Peter and the Stupid Boy Stories. I was nearing the end of a 2-week stint in a 4th grade class where we'd been telling stories, talking about history, talking about our area here and how people lived hundreds and thousands of years ago. And it was the first time I'd ever done something like that. It was not the last time. I'd been a storyteller all my life, and I'd done a lot of storytelling in the schools. But this was the first time that I was doing storytelling with stories from a different culture than my own. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go. But it was very fun. Excuse me, and I did it many times after this. There were lots of stories, and I had gotten all the stories from Peter Kalifornsky, who had, in his 50s, found out to his surprise that he was one of 3 or 4 people in the whole world that spoke the language that he was born into. His life had taken him around, and he learned 3 languages, lived in 2 different cultures. But in his 50s, he found out that he was one of the last speakers, and eventually was the last speaker of the Dena'ina language from this side of the inlet. And he spent the rest of his life teaching and promoting people to take interest in that language, in those stories, in that culture. And I took a class from him in college, and he had each one of us tell him what we would do or could do to help interest people in the stories from this side of the inlet. And I was a storyteller, so I said, I can tell some stories. And he encouraged me to do that. So I was doing that for the first time, and we had told the stories several times, because it's hard to hear a story from a different culture and really get everything you want to get from it. And so on this day, one of the boys raised his hand and said, tell us a story that you've already told us. And one of the girls said, tell us the stupid boy stories. Well, I had told the stories a few times. There were 4 stories. They were tales told for boys to help teach them that they needed to listen to the stories, and they needed to listen to how to do things, or things would not go well for them. And I was a little uncomfortable with them because I don't tell stories with such dire endings in my culture, but the kids really enjoyed these stories. There were 4 stories. The first 3 told about boys that wouldn't listen and had dire consequences. And the 4th told about a boy who they thought didn't listen, but it turned out he had been listening, and he got a reward at the end. So when the girl asked me to tell those stories, some of the boys said, oh, tell some stupid girl stories this time. And I said, well, I don't know any stupid girl stories, so I'll tell you the stupid boy stories. Oh, said all the boys. Once there was a boy who wouldn't ever listen to the stories, and he wouldn't learn. And his parents tried everything they knew to do, and finally they took him to his uncle. And they said, take him and teach him, and if you can't teach him, don't bring him back to us. Because they knew that it was a very difficult life, and if you didn't learn the things you needed to learn for survival, you wouldn't survive, and you would make it hard on everybody. So his uncle took him into the woods and pointed out this and that as they walked along, and the boy didn't seem to be very interested. And finally the uncle said, let's make a deadfall trap. I'll show you how to do it. So he made the deadfall trap, and the boy helped him when he asked him to, but he didn't seem very interested. That night when they made camp, the uncle said, if there's something in that deadfall trap, we could have it for dinner. Why don't you go back and check it? And the boy said, where was that? And the uncle said, you didn't notice what way we were going? It's right over there. He explained how to find it, and the boy went off. And just as he was leaving, he turned back and he said, if there's nothing in the trap, what should I do? And the uncle said, well, if there's nothing in there, just pull on the bait. And the boy didn't come back. And then there was another boy that never listened to the stories. Oh, the boy said, oh, no, don't tell us another stupid boy story. Tell us a stupid girl story. I said, I don't know any stupid girl stories. And I just couldn't help myself. I said, because girls really aren't stupid. Oh, the boys thought that was awful. The girls loved it. I said, no, that's really not it. Who did I get these stories from? Peter Kalifornsky, they said. And is Peter a boy or a girl? He's a boy. I said, he gave me these stories. These are the only ones I have. I need to tell you about stupid boy stories because that's what Peter Kalifornsky knew about. So they all settled back in. Once there was a boy who never listened to the stories, and his father was the chief, and he didn't pay very much attention to the boy, and he spoiled him. And so finally some of the people went to the father and they said, he will not listen to the stories. And his father said, leave him alone. Let him become the man he wishes to become. So after that, the people didn't try to teach the boy. And pretty soon the boy came to them and he said, I want you to give me a boat and a bow and arrow, and I want you to make me a fire that I can take along with me. I want to go out in the boat. So the people remembered what his father had said, and they set him all up, and they watched him go out across the bay. And he was going this way and that way, and they weren't sure what was going to happen, so they got in their own boat, and they went after him to make sure nothing bad happened to him. He finally found an island, and the island had no trees on it. And he pulled the boat up on the beach there, and there were no trees, but there was a lot of driftwood. And he took the fire that they had made for him, he took it out and he started making a fire. And oh, he made a big, big fire, which isn't a good idea when you don't have a lot of stuff to burn. But that boy made a big fire, and the people watched. And then he said, fire, you are a glutton. You have eaten every piece of driftwood on this island. Here, take my bow and arrow. Here, take my bow. Oh, those people that were watching said, should we do something? Should we say something? They said, well, his father told us to let him become the man he wishes to become. A long time later, the father was looking around and he said, I haven't seen my son. Does anybody know where my son went? And they told him the story, and he said, you didn't tell him? Don't burn your boat. Don't burn your bow and arrows. They said, well, we thought we should, but you told us to let him become the man he wished to become. And then there was another boy who never listened to the stories. Oh, the boys' heads were all down on their desks. The girls were loving this. They were thinking this is pretty cool. One of the boys says, no, just make this one a girl. I said, no, I really can't. Once there was a boy who never listened to the stories, and his parents took him to his uncle and said, we can't teach him. You teach him. If he doesn't learn, don't bring him back to us. So the uncle took him out into the woods, and they walked along, and they came to a place where a tree had fallen over a very steep precipice with sharp rocks beneath it. And the uncle said, don't ever climb out on a tree like that because it's not holding on very well. And the boy thought that was hilarious. And he ran out that tree. And the uncle said, I'm going to chop that tree off. Come back in. And he started chopping. And the boy jumped on one of the branches and he bounced up and down, laughing. And just then, a wind came and blew that tree and the boy down into off that precipice. And then there was another boy. Oh, no, said the boys. No, make this a girl. Just make this a girl. I said, I can't. That's not the right way to tell him. Yes, yeah, just for now, just this one time, make this a girl. And all the boys started banging on their desks. Make it a girl, make it a girl. And I said, well, do you remember me telling you these stories before? Yes, make it a girl. I said, do you really want the last one to be about a girl? Yes, make it a girl. Some of the girls were going, yeah, make it a girl, make it a girl. I said, once there was a girl who wouldn't listen to the stories. And her parents took her to her uncle and they said, teacher, don't bring her back to us if she won't learn. The uncle walked out with her into the woods and they came to a place where there was a tree that had fallen out over a steep precipice with sharp rocks. One of the boys goes, you just told this one. I said, just hold on. Hanging out over this steep precipice. And he said to that girl, now you don't want to ever climb out on a tree like that because, and she said, Uncle, if you want to hurt me, you have a spear. You can hurt me with your spear. And he said, you have been listening to the stories. That's all we ask. Now this is your spear, and you can take care of yourself. Oh, were those boys ever disappointed. Peter always had a twinkle in his eye, and he always had kind of a mischievous little smile on his face. And I could see that face right there as I looked at those boys, realizing that this was their stupid boy story. They had not been listening to the stories, and Peter and I had done our job.